Now to the new reporting concerning Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's role in that July 25th phone call between President Trump and the president of Ukraine that is now at the center of an impeachment inquiry. A senior State Department official tells the Wall Street Journal and NBC News has confirmed the reporting that Pompeo was among the administration officials who listened in on the phone call. Pompeo's participation on the call hasn't been previously reported. In interviews last week, Pompeo said that he hadn't read the whistleblower's complaint in its entirety, but maintained that actions by the State Department had been entirely appropriate.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that President Trump pressed the president of Ukraine 8 times to work with Rudy Giuliani to investigate Joe Biden's son. What do you know about those conversations?
So you just gave me a report about a high-seek whistleblower campaign, none of which I've seen.
Are you confident that none of your staff, that you or none of your staff did anything improper in this whole situation? Thank you.
So, Matt, I haven't had a chance to actually read the whistleblower complaint yet. I read the first couple of paragraphs and then got busy today. But I'll ultimately get a chance to see it. If I understand it right, it's from someone who had secondhand knowledge. To the best of my knowledge, and from what I've seen so far, each of the actions that were undertaken by State Department officials was entirely appropriate.
I don't know.
Come on.
I don't know which one of those clips is more insulting. He lies in both. You know, in the second, he was talking about, from what he understood, the whistleblower had secondhand knowledge, and yet there he was.
He was in the room.
On
he was
the
on
phone, listening to the conversation. He knows more than all of us know right now, and yet he lied to those reporters. And let's just play the first clip again, because again, it's
You
not
can
just
see
the
him
lying.
struggling.
It's not just the lying, it's the arrogance. In both cases, he laughs off the question. He's so arrogant. And he's so snide. Oh, well, you're asking me a question that he knows nothing about. I'm sorry, play the clip again.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that President Trump pressed the president of Ukraine 8 times to work with Rudy Giuliani to investigate Joe Biden's son. What do you know about those conversations?
So you just gave me a report about a high-seek whistleblower campaign, none of which I've seen.
Willie, I don't know where to start there. No, I mean, you just gave me a report, and you just, again, she asked him a specific question. What do you know about the conversation?
Yeah.
He was listening into the conversation and yet lied two times there. Once at the UN saying, oh, I have work to do, I'm busy, and this was just secondhand knowledge. Again, it just shows the extraordinary bad faith that the president and all the president's men are engaged in right now in any past administration.
And this is what the media is up against. This is what Democrats are up against. Yeah. They're not going to tell you the truth, and you have to assume that.
In any past administration, a Secretary of State lying like that would be fired. In any past administration, except maybe the Nixon administration, an attorney general that has lied as much and committed perjury in front of the United States Congress would be fired. You were exactly right. We are now at a point where we have to assume the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the President of the United States, the Vice President, they're all in on this, and they're all lying. Why? Because they've already proven it to us.
And the Secretary of State, Eddie, leapt right to when he said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't read this report. But what I do know is that it was secondhand, that it was hearsay. So in other words, he hasn't read the report, but he knows he should be attacking it because that's the order he's been given. We also heard last week from Rudy Giuliani when he would ask, what are you doing in Ukraine with this investigation? He said, I was sent there by the State Department. Well, that makes sense now because you have the Secretary of State, the head of the State Department, on the call helping President Trump direct this back and forth, this quid pro quo with Ukraine.
What we see here is that the problem that we locate principally with Trump is not simply Trump's problem. That lying with impunity is, in fact, the culture of the White House. That truthiness, that old Colbert word, right, has become the order of the day. And it seems to me that when you combine this culture of lying with this deep distrust of government that runs throughout the country, right? It seems that we're in a moment of intense crisis, not just simply with them and all of the president's men, but in crisis in terms of our democracy as such, because you got to have trust as the basis, as the foundation for democratic deliberation. When you have folk lying to you day in and day out, and folk not trusting what's coming out of their mouths, I don't know how we move to the next stage.
You know, Donnie Deutsch, we predicted that 2018 for the House would be bad. Of course, Mika was talking about how Kavanaugh would actually help Republicans win the Senate. But in this case, it's so very obvious that the Republican brand every day is being tarnished badly by Pompeo lying, Barr lying, the president lying. All of this, it's one scandal after another. And by the way, again, these are scandals that are unfolding in plain view of the American people. If this were a deep state conspiracy, 55% of Americans wouldn't support an impeachment inquiry. These numbers wouldn't go. So this is what I want to know. When does the Republican Party, when do Republican senators, when do Republican House members, instead of retiring because they don't want to lose in 2020 or put up with Donald Trump anymore, when do they say, hey, wait a second, we need to get rid of all these guys who are lying on national TV every day, damaging our reputation, and we can get Nikki Haley or Marco Rubio or, you know, John Thune or, you know, you name it. We could find other people who are not, you know, Mitt Romney, other people who don't make lying their MO every day. When do they do that? Because you've worked with brands that have faced crises and they've had to get rid of their CEO and bring in new CEOs and clean things up. At what point do Republicans just say, hey, it is time?
You know, remember that movie Marathon Man, Laurence Olivier, where is it safe? Is it safe? And I think we're getting to that point where it's safe for Republicans to come out. It's interesting, you use the word unfolding. In the last day, 6 stories ranging from the president tweeting about civil war, saying that basically Adam Schiff should be held for treason, which means executed. We have Rudy Giuliani, who's been subpoenaed. We found out that Barr was over in Italy. We found out the president is on with the Australian prime minister trying to get more dirt. I mean, this is just one day. I do believe, and everybody keeps saying, oh, the Republicans are never going to appeal, they're never going to appeal, for the exact just reason you said. Not only are they, does it get to a point where you can't run cover, they see even if he doesn't get impeached out of office, he's a loser in 2020. And let's start to get behind it. Nikki Haley beats every Democrat that's out there right now. Mitt Romney beats every Democrat that's out there right now.
Every single one.
That, to me, I think we're just seeing the opening credits of this stuff. All of the staffers that are involved have lawyered up already. This is just the beginning of Act 3, and we're already close to that 50% threshold mark. So I think the Republicans, at some point, you know, nobody wants Donald Trump. They don't want Donald Trump there. We know that. Even Jeff Flake said that 35 senators, if he voted publicly, they don't want him there. And I don't think we are that far. It was interesting. Mitch McConnell yesterday said, yes, I would take the impeachment to the Senate. And I was assuming he was going to do Merrick Garland, because there is a little wiggle room in there. Do you actually have to take it to the Senate? So I think you're starting to see the cracks already. And I would not be surprised come 2020 that the Republican candidate is not Nikki Haley.
So, you know, Gene, it's not like Donald Trump has a loyalty with the party base like these other people that I mentioned, Marco Rubio or Mitt Romney or Nikki Haley. You have in Donald Trump a guy who, in the last decade, gave money to Anthony Weiner, gave money to Elliot Spitzer, gave money to Charlie Rangel, gave money to Kamala Harris. Yes, in 2014, gave money to Kamala Harris, gave money to Hillary Clinton 8 times, gave money to Andrew Cuomo. He has been a Democrat. And now, because what he's doing, he's going to destroy the Republican Party unless they get this lifetime Democrat out and put in somebody like Nikki Haley or Mitt Romney or Marco Rubio, who have actually been Republicans and, for the most part, conservatives their entire life.
Yeah, but you're appealing to Republicans' logic, and that's not the grounds on which they're making the decision to stick with Trump thus far. It's their fear. You know, you look at those polls, and the shift in the numbers on impeachment is truly stunning. I mean, it is like almost overnight. Last week it changed.
And by the way, Gene, in one poll, 1 out of 3 Republicans, in one poll, 1 out of 3 Republicans supports the inquiry. That's pretty significant.
Yeah. And that's the one that, you know, that's the number to look at, because in most of the polls, you know, most Republicans are sticking with him, and most Republicans, as long as most Republicans stick with him, I think most of our Republican elected officials in their craven cowardice are going to stick with Donald Trump. That's what they're going to do. But what a fascinating day. You know, Donnie was listing those stories just from yesterday. A lot of them in the 4 o'clock hour. Poor Nicolle Wallace was was like a one-armed paper hanger trying to deal with all that breaking news. But you know, interesting possibilities about Barr and Pompeo. They're really two stories here. Either they're both like all in with Trump on these conspiracy theories and this craziness and illegality, frankly, that he's committing, or they're humoring him and they're trying to just sort of contain this malevolent force of nature. Either way, it's an awful, dangerous situation for this country.
And a dangerous situation for them legally, Mika.
Also dangerous that he's focused on Adam Schiff, threatening and focused on the whistleblower.
Civil War.
You see him doddering around the White House, talking uncomfortably about trying to locate the whistleblower. Something's really off.
Well,
obviously, we know what it is.
And again, Mika, this is a president who has encouraged violence in the past, has said, hey, beat up protesters, I'll pay for your legal fees. I've got some of the toughest people in the world. Yeah. You know, the thing is, when he makes these calls for civil war, rank and file Republicans aren't going to listen, because they actually understand how this constitutional republic works. But there are people that don't have guardrails up. And he's sending a message to them to commit acts of violence. He's seen it before. He's seen it with a pipe bomber. He's seen it with a Coast Guard person who drew up a hit list of media members and his Democratic challengers. He knows what he's doing, and it's getting dangerous and out of control.
The sooner more answers come out, not that, I mean, we've got a lot, but this is definitely, and it's wearing on him, and the behavior is impacting people because he threatens them.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.